Hey folks, Ori here, how are you all doing? This video is a top 17, it's gonna be kind of more of a talk while the top's in the background. There will be a few points where I discuss like how things went, but generally this video is going to also feed into the next couple of videos that we do. So without any further delay, we'll get into it. I've already been running the video a little bit anyway, just because it's a sap skip for the first pack, and we go straight into the boss. So there's not really too much to discuss. We are running the Tempest of the Lightbringer Legendary because this was a fortified Inspiring Grievous week, because this was done last week, and we kind of just go into it. There's a few things of concession to make at the start of this dungeon. Smooth Killer, our Hunter, because this was a complete pug run, really didn't perform that well. There are periods where they're just not doing anything. You saw there for a second that they were just stood waiting for a cooldown. Like, they had an auto shot, they'd obviously hit their escape button, like they weren't attacking. There was no animation, anything. And as a result, their damage is somewhat lackluster throughout the entire dungeon. They also do die a lot. Like, I think they are single-handedly responsible for, if 100%, if not a good 90% of the deaths. Because I can't remember if this was a clean run outside of his deaths. So, if anyone's got any knowledge on hunters, please feel free to comment below and educate me on kind of like how they play, like how squishy are they, especially on these 17, 18 keys. Because I don't die very often outside of my own stupidity. Like, I can take a fair amount of damage, and I don't know if that's just a innate paladin wearing plate trait. Not really too much to say about the first boss, to be honest. It was very cleave heavy, so worked to our advantage. Did have to utilize a little bit of off healing, and kind of keeping the group up. I don't think the shaman was prepared for the amount of damage, because they went through a considerable amount of healing and mana. So by this point in the fight, the chamois is running pretty low. But thankfully we're just down to the one mob, and it's fairly straightforward from here. Need to be a little bit faster on those particular interrupts. I should also be remembering to run Blinding Light for keys rather than Fist of Justice, purely because the Blinding Light utility comes into it quite well. And on that note, I will also be releasing an updated Ret Paladin Mythic Plus guide with the aims of 1.5 proving it. So we will also be approaching the 9.1.5 Paladin changes and how things will affect us. So like the uncapping of Divine Storm and whether that's going to shift our place in the current meta potentially, or if it's going to force Tempest of the Lightbringer to become our one and only legendary of choice for Mythic Plus. So we will be discussing that at length in a video in the near future. Hopefully around the same time that we actually get an announcement for 9.1.5, because we're all kind of waiting on bated breath, seeing as we will be hitting 80 renown next week. Soggodon, fairly straightforward. He's kind of the one where I pop my single target cooldowns after the boss, so not too much to spout about. Bit of little pad DPS though. If you wait to hit wings and everything until after he pulls you all in, so you can final reckoning all the chains for the first lot, it means that no one else has to worry about them. Yeah. As I said, this particular top run is fairly straightforward outside of a few things, so I'll just leave it to play normally with a little bit of background music on, and we'll discuss certain things as they arise, like if there's going to be a point where, oh, this was really interesting, or I noticed that I had to do this in order to keep the group alive, type situation. So sit back, enjoy, and I will chat to you when the next bit of interesting bit stuff occurs. Standard bubbling off the bleed. Could have also, like, I could have bopped it if I was the main target, but I tend to reserve bops for other people. Make the healer's life easier on that particular mob. Now, the Demon Hunter is going to do a very, very large pull here, so I believe I actually lay on hands him. I do this occasionally with tanks from time to time, when they don't communicate that they're going for a big pull and they just go. People kind of get the hint because it's the done thing, but also the Shaman was picking up the banner. So, Hunter, the Demon Hunter leapt back into range, and I then laid him. Now, you can see here that the Shackled Soul Inspiring Mob is my priority target, and we're kind of in that situation where Execution Sentence was wasted there. It didn't hit. And this is something that I'm beginning to realize in these key difficulties. There is a very, very fine line between something having enough health where the Execution Sentence goes off, and it being completely and utterly useless until we get to boss fights or large elite mobs. So these elemental or soul elementals are a good example of it. Execution Sentence here would be fantastic, but for the smaller pack-to-pack elites, Execution Sentence very, 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 very rarely is now getting the ability to proc. So I'm, like, for instance, a couple of dungeons I did last night with Stitch, only one of them was partially recorded. I'm having like 20 casts of an Execution Sentence over the course of a dungeon, and only 14 of them are hitting. Which is wasted holy power. Which kind of gets me onto the other note of I actually need to improve my holy power thing, because I'm noticing that I'm going through rotations, and I'll have like 4 holy power, and I am still pressing Blade of Wrath, rather than Templar's Verdicting, then Blade of Wrath. So, despite the fact that I have the Hellkilly add-on in front of me, I am still messing up. So I don't know if I need to move it down to the center of my screen between my nameplates, or something else, but I need to work on it. You can see here that I don't take a lot of damage from this, which is quite nice. I am a very tonky boy. Big Torongo moo. Make old girl moo go coom. Sorry, I'm going to apologize for lack of sleep and the fact that the next few videos are going to sound like utter garbage. But I wanted to get these out, and I've got a lot on my plate at the moment. So, I apologize for the yawning, and I apologize for the really, really daft jokes in the middle of things. Oh god, I pity the people that are going to be listening to me stream. Anyway, nah. We'll try to keep it professional. Not too much to worry about for the next couple of packs. The Hunter will go down again invariably, and kind of put us in this position where we're just having to do things ourselves. Because this is one thing that I have noticed. Like, and I've actually gotten a couple grief from this from a couple of groups. Like, you can see in that last pack, my DPS was 4.3k. I held everything for this pack, because this pack is a problem, because these Portal Guardians slap, paired with an Inspiring Bone Magus and a Soulbinder. Like, this isn't going to be pretty. We're waiting here, unfortunately, because our tank accidentally double-clicked the portal and ended up going back to where we just started. So, tank goes. Now, the Portal Guardian is kind of the big bad, so he actually gets my execution sentence on for this. I do bubble, and then we just go into it once wings and everything's back. And yeah, the hunter was dead for this. Like, dead almost immediately. I stun the Soulbinder. And we just continue with the rotation. I think the healer could have done with trying to assist more in damage at certain points. You can see that things get really hairy here. Healer actually goes down. And I actually had to walk myself to keep myself up. Because both my vial and my health stone, or health pot, were on cooldown. I actually opened my bag there to check. Because sometimes my UI shows as having 0 when I have 1, and having 3 when I have none. So I don't know if that's just an icon thing. So we try to stack these up. Personally, I'd have preferred to have taken the other 2. Primarily because it is so much easier to avoid. And again, for some reason, the hunter just did not move and got caught by a pillar. So, a lot of needless deaths. Like, him and the chamois are the current 4 deaths. Which, you know, happens. Right, you can see there that I manually just marked star, so that people should know that because I've marked it, it's mine. So I go for stun, it's DR stun. So it was immune to the stun, and unfortunately a cast did go off. Now, realistically, the hunter should have made use of his cooldowns and turtled, or at least moved. But, yeah. Because that pack would have been a lot less problematic. Now, we end up in the situation where the tank pulls to the side, which I'm not really used to. But, percentage-wise, it worked out quite nicely. So, it wasn't too bad. I think this is to make up for the fact that we skipped the first pack. But it's fine. It gave us time for our cooldowns back. And I believe in this next pack I end up using my 1 minute. Rather than wings. Yeah, I do. I use my 1 minute. One thing I do need to practice in terms of a Pelagos thing is I need to get used to picking up the blue balls again. It got to a point where I just stopped trying to go for the mastery extension. And I think that's actively hurting my damage. I think it is more beneficial for me to step out and pick up one of those blue balls than it is for me to stay in melee range for that 2 seconds. And have my mastery drop off sooner. So, something for me to work on. But in talking about conduits and soulbinds, and this week, because it's spiteful, I'm actually giving Mechanicos a test, because I have spoken with some of the, or one of the top Ret Paladins for Mythic Plus, and this week's quite a good week to make use of Mechanicos' haste amp. Especially if you're chaining from pack to pack, because you can hit a spiteful mob for the first time and maintain like 5 stacks of haste, which is pretty big. Kul'Tharok, fairly standard fight. I do make a mistake here by stepping too far forward in my soul. Like I took a step too early, and as a result made my soul free. Like, Free Willy! But yeah, outside of that, it's a fairly standard fight. One thing of note, though, in terms of tanking, if you step out of melee range, he starts casting. Now, because we've picked up Soul Boy, or Snare Boy, Ouroboros? Nah, whatever his name is, we have access to Uncivil Etiquette. Which means that if you would, as a tank, if you stand out of melee range and one of your DPS kick, they get a damage increase. Pair that with this raw soul damage increase and burst windows, the boss is going to be in for a bad time. Now, you saw me lay on hands the rogue. The healer has no mana at all. And at this point, my off healing is coming into use. So you can see there that I overcorrect. I stand far enough back that my soul is definitely caught by the grasping hands. Now, our Shami manages to keep things going and keeps people alive just. Hammer of Wrath goes out and we end up transitioning, which is rather nice. But we did end up in a situation where the hunter's DPS was so much lower, I ended up inspecting him. And frankly, I was not impressed. The dude had just shy of 250 item level, and his single target DPS was 5.5k for that boss. And he's also, as I mentioned already, he died a lot. Now, this is kind of problematic because we have so many mobs that we don't have the kicks for it. We don't have anything else. I stood in a thing that I shouldn't have, so I end up bubbling here. So I've got both lay on hands and bubble on cooldown. We're running out of defensives and things get very, very hairy because I don't have a kick. Neither the hunter, the shaman, or the demon hunter kicked. So things are going off here that really shouldn't. Like, I shield a vengeance there to survive the Grievous. I then also health pot, and then I'm throwing out utility. So I do actually walk here a couple of times during this cluster that is a boss fight, rather than doing damage, which is never a good sign. Because although we have the utility, sometimes it's best for us not to use it and for us to kill something. But with these two larger health elites, I needed to I needed to top people up. Because again, the healer has no mana. I don't think I've seen the healer sit down and drink. Nope. And there, now they've sat down to start drinking. So yeah, this was a rough key. There was a lot of things wrong with it. Now, one Withering Discharge goes off because the Inspiring Mob has yet to die. It didn't quite have the health, or it shouldn't have had the health for me to warrant execution sentencing it. Hence, my execution sentence went on the Putrid Butcher, but unfortunately, it seemed like I was the only one attacking it. Now, you'll see there that I am disease dispelling off the healer, because they do actually get a healing reduction based on that disease. So I did try to mitigate the problems that the group was facing. Because as I said, kicks just weren't happening and they were being missed. Which made me very, very, very scared for Incinerator. Because obviously if Infernal gets cast and goes off, it hurts a lot. So, yeah, you can see there that I'm checking death count. I'm kind of checking everything else, thinking, I'm making sure that various buffs are up, checking my Ana Power, checking my Mastery, checking my Haste. It's like, right, do I have everything? Like, I sack the Hunter here because the Hunter was taking so much, and the Hunter still ends up standing in something. Like, I genuinely think if I had not sacked him, he'd have died. Like, he'd have just flat died to standing in the fire. Thankfully, though, the kicks were squared, and both me and the rogue had the same idea of just delete this thing, and that's what we did. We popped everything, the pair of us, and just sent him into next week. Now, thankfully, because we do have a rogue present, we got Shroud of Concealment, which means that obviously we didn't have to contend with anyone potentially body pulling that ad, which was nice. It helped. Now again, Inspiring Mob is kind of my priority target, thankfully, because it's now a diseased horror. I can focus it, but unfortunately the Blight Spreader didn't get kicked. Now, obviously, with me being near the diseased horror, I wasn't going to run out to try and get the kick, because I don't think I'd have made it regardless by the time I realised it needed kicking. But we do have 2 ranged. Like, the Shaman has a kick, is very rarely using it. The Hunter has a kick, very rarely using it. I'm kind of dispelling myself at this point, because it's also a damage reduction, and I, again, kind of the only one that's really going for the Inspiring Mob. Everyone else is cleaving onto the Inspiring Mob. Like, I lay on hands the healer to bring the healer up, so the healer's not having to worry about the mana for them, and just kind of cycling through the fight. It's at this point I made a comment to Stitch, I believe, while I was on Discord, that, like, why the hell are people missing kicks? And this was kind of the eye-opener for me as well, because I do miss kicks when I shouldn't. I felt very much like Time. With Time being away on holiday with his family this week and not being around, I very much felt the responsible paladin. And, boy, it's not a good feeling. Like, kudos to Time and massive respect, and I'm sorry, buddy. Like, man, I got some work to do. I have work to do anyway, because my current goal is hit 2300 IO score. I'm at 2250, or just shy of. But because Blizzard have announced that the top 0.1% of IO score is getting a fancy title in 9.1.5, I want to hit 2700, because, you know, I'm Horde. So, of course, the score is going to be higher. Oh, they really, 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 really need to implement cross-faction PvE. Although, to be fair, if they did that, my Paladin would probably immediately become human. Because, you know, red bonuses. But we can discuss that another day. So, yeah, Leapy Boys. I think the Hunter also gets slapped again here, which is going to be quite funny. Oh, no. No. I'm thinking of a different dungeon where the Hunter that joined us just got slapped. Now, this was an interesting pull and not something I was expecting, but it kind of worked in my favor because I used my 1 minute and then just hold for, like, go for wings. So, you can see here that it just goes in. I realized that no one was kicking the meat shield, so going into, like, the next couple, I try to catch the meat shields and, like, swap to target it. Because end of the day, these things still need to die. Because it's unnecessary tank damage. I will try and disease dispel the tank as we go through this fight. There we go. So I got the meat shield that time. And just generally focusing on Gorechop and cleaving the other 2 mobs down. So rather than Templar's Verdicting, I'm Divine Storming, which brings into account my good legendary. Now, that meat shield did get cast and I didn't kick it. So that's on me, because my kick was on cooldown. And this kind of feeds back into that. I need to be more aware of my kicks. So I may need to look at a better weak aura. Now, the tank is getting absolutely slapped. Thankfully, my cooldowns are about to come back, and I can properly go to town, which is what I do, and as a result, it skyrockets me in DPS, and I actually get rid of some of those pesky ads that have been a problem. Because end of the day, that's my job. So that meat shield is cast, I see it and I kick it. But again, need to be more aware of things like that. The disease dispelling though is definitely helping the healer out, but it's a very thankless job. And that's something that you'll find a lot with Paladin utility. Very, very rarely will anyone ever thank you for it or comment on it. But it does make group runs much easier. I lay on hands the rogue there because the rogue is my priority to keep alive due to the nature of the damage of the dungeon and the fact that it is me and the rogue that have been doing the bulk of this work. So Gorechop goes down without too many problems. I must admit at this point I was quite relieved that the hunter was still alive. I was expecting it to have gone down or been caught by hooks. But still, like, single target DPS for that fight. Yes, I know I had the padding with my wings in the middle of that, which took my DPS up a couple of thousand during my wings period. But the hunter is still only pulling half my DPS. Which is beginning to irritate me at this point. And rewatching the video is beginning to irritate me. Because it made the 17 considerably harder than it needed to be. But it's fine. We timed it, and that's all that matters. Because end of the day, this was timed, and it was a score increase for me, so it was all good. But because this dungeon has been slower in places than it's needed to be, we've ended up in this situation where I now have all my cooldowns back, and I've got no idea when to use them. So you see there that I actually use my 45 seconds, I use Wake, and I use Seraphim. Because I wasn't sure what the hell I was going to do. And you can see that I've got 20 seconds until Seraphim comes back, so realistically what I could have done is I could have used my minutes. I could have used Final Reckoning and Execution Sentence on that target, and then used Heaving the Breaker here as cooldown, like a cooldown timer, basically, and just kind of had everything tick back up. So you can see I hit Seraphim, and I go to use my minutes. I use my minutes on this guy, but hold wings, because, again, I'm kind of concerned for this next pack, because this next pack is inspiring, it's a keeper, we don't have a Death Knight to control the squad leader, so I'm kind of holding wings. I'm also going to utilize a lot of my utility going into this next pack, which is kind of the big reason why this key was kind of salvaged in terms of we'll talk through it jobby. Because I get that Theatre of Pain is actually a relatively boring dungeon to commentate and talk about because it is 5 bosses. It is essentially a boss run. So I go in, I bop the healer, and I sack the hunter. So I bopped the healer to make sure that the healer didn't get targeted with anything. I sacked, and that demoralizing shout got off, and again, that was on me. I should have kicked it, but then again, so could the paladin. Oh, no, I am the paladin. So could the hunter, rogue, and shaman, but they didn't. So, although it's not entirely on me, I should treat these pug situations as it is on me. I need to try and get every kick. That's not going to be possible as a paladin, but if I can keep my kick on cooldown, then at least I'm doing my job right. If I'm actually getting the kicks and not just pressing it every 15 seconds for the sake of it. Now, I was quite happy that the hunter actually showed up for that pack and did a reasonable amount of damage, but still. Not too much to say about Wreck the Hardened. She's basically just the hokey cokey boss. You put your left foot in, you put your right foot out, do the hokey cokey and you shake it all about. I hate mobs like this, where it is just a dance in and out. Like, as a ranged DPS at this point, Smooth should be wiping the floor with me and the rogue. But he isn't. Not only that, but the rogue also got clipped there, so immediately had to lay on hands him. So I'm getting full use out of healing hands. Because what should be a 10-minute cooldown, this is the thing. With healing hands and turning it into a 7-minute cooldown, it gets reduced to a 3-minute cooldown. When, because Unbreakable Spirit reduces it by to the 7 minutes, and then obviously Healing Hands reduces it the rest of the way based on the effectiveness at which it was used. Now, without Unbreakable Spirit, that's still going to be about a 4-minute cooldown, which is still big. It's just one of those things where, like, will the CC break or CC interrupt of Healing Hands be more beneficial than the extra Healing Hands? Because as a Tauren, although we don't have the Purge that Blood Elves have, we have War Stomp paired with Blinding Light and our normal stun. It means that we do have a reasonable amount of access to AoE CC things, and you'll see me use it in the Halls of Atonement 19 that we'll do. These banners are lasting way too long, so I think it was just me and the Demon Hunter that was attacking them. Deafening Crash. Thankfully no one got hit by it. I remember clenching, well, yeah, I just did as well, watching the video. I remember clenching for that hunter being like, don't get hit by the smash, don't get hit by the smash. Now here's the Oppressive Banner. I kind of focus on Xav here and just go to town on him. And thankfully he drops without too much of a problem, and then we go on to Mordretha. We have 6 minutes left. It's a fortified. Mordretha's going down. Now, skip ahead to the little RP bit, so we'll skip 10 seconds. Or skip 30 seconds, rather. We're now at 5:20. Mordretha's about to spawn. This is done and dusted. Or at least, it should be. Ah. Question is, how close to the timer do we get? I think I need to be less greedy with Wake. Looking at how my rotation actually goes, I try to use Wake at the very, very last second before Execution Sentence actually goes off, and I'm not entirely sure that's the play. I sack the healer. Probably should have actually sacked the hunter, to be fair, given the fact that the hunter takes considerably more damage than the shaman does over the course of the dungeon. But keeping the healer alive is paramount in these situations. Now, the hunter there used Exile for no discernible reason. He wasn't really in any danger, but Exile was used. So, not entirely sure what was going on there. He managed to avoid the damage there, so he was the only one that didn't get hit, which is good. But, minutes are coming back up. I believe I get hit by a ghostly charge here, because I can't see what's coming to the right of me. And, yeah, I end up stepping forward and getting clapped by it. Fortunately enough, this particular build, I am running 14% versatility, so I took 7% less damage, which is always handy. Now, I immediately kick my jobby. No, I stun my jobby because my kick's on cooldown. Take mine out, avoid the charge, and we just crack on. I don't have lay on hands. I tried to lay the hunter, and then realised I still have 4 minutes left on lay on hands. So I end up wogging him instead. And we end the dungeon there. So we end the dungeon comfortably. We time it. It was worth 2 score. Not the greatest mana score in the world, but still. 2 score is 2 score. Now, something that does bug me, as we were kind of discussing, was the fact that, like, me and the Rogue both did 8.2 and 8.3k DPS respectively. Not my highest by any stretch of the imagination, but the key is also very boss heavy. So there's not huge moments for me to AoE pad with Divine Storm like there would be in, say, a Halls, a Spire of Ascension, Mist of Tinasith. Mist is actually a really good example, to be fair. But the Hunter pulled 5k overall, and pulled, if we go back slightly just so I can take the bar out of the way, less than 5, like, it did 5 million less damage over the course of the dungeon. Now, I'm all for people, like, joining and learning dungeons and stuff like that, because end of the day, this is a journey for us all. But what I don't understand is how that can happen with so much gear. Like, it felt like it was a boost, and it shouldn't have done. But we did time it, and the fact that the DPS disparity was so much, it does give me confidence that we should be looking at doing 19s and 20s. It will be interesting to see going into the early part of this week, and also probably tonight, because I will probably be streaming keys this evening. Whether or not that translates, and we can still do work in those 18s and 19s, or if it was just fortunate, and the reason the Hunter's DPS looked so bad is just because they kept getting clipped by unnecessary stuff, and when they were actually with us, they were doing a lot of work. But if you have any answers to that quandary, please comment below, and if this video has helped you at all, also, please let me know. In the meantime, though, I'll catch you in the next one, folks. Take care.